welcome back to another episode of Fireside Chat. I believe it is episode 29. I am your host, Ken. I am a social media person. I also am in charge of sales occasionally at conventions. And I am with Mr. Andrew Valkowskis, the lovely creator of this, creator Norns and all that fun stuff. And we're joined also with Mr. Ed. I hope I say your name well. Bourelle? Is that Bourelle?
You don't have to put the French spin on it, but yes, Bourelle.
Bourelle, perfect. I wasn't sure if it was French or not, so Bourelle.
Well, I'm sure it is, but the French has definitely been weeded out of it over the years.
Over generations.
Pronunciation. Yeah.
That is awesome. I mean, that's fair. So before we continue on, I would like to mention to the chat that we have officially launched our Kickstarter. It is the I think it's called the Ultimate Anthropology. Is that what it is, Andrew?
Not anthropology, no. The Ultimate Viking Anthology. Also known as everything that we wrote and designed over the last 18 months while shuttered in. That was the alternate title to the Kickstarter, but I think it was going to be too long for the field and Kickstarter. We went for something a little bit more brief and punchy.
We will have that linked into our description. I think we should be still having this Kickstarter while this video comes out on YouTube. But right now on Twitch, I will put that link in the description. But yes, Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself, since I've already, do a little bit of our own self-promotion.
Right on. My name's Ed Bourelle. I think we covered that part. I am the founder and pretty much sole creative force behind Skeleton Key Games. I make a lot of RPG accessories. I've done a little bit of stuff for Morkborg, like a campaign for them. And I just kind of built my company around making stuff that I feel like doing. Right? Yeah, let's see. I think I do have the Masticator Gate here.
There we go. That's the right one.
Actually, I got the original cover art back behind me in the studio here.
Nice.
But yeah, so I kind of designed this company because I was like, I wanted to get away from my day job. Kickstarter is such an amazing platform for creatives to be able to put stuff out there, and so it's kind of like, if I have a cool idea, which kind of is daily, whatever one I prioritize, I just kind of do it. I'll bring in some collaborators and make some cool stuff.
How did you get into just tabletop as a hobby? Where did it all begin? The love for, I guess, just RPGs or board games or card games. Where did it all, where's the trail of breadcrumbs begin?
When I was a kid, the neighbor across the street was heavily into wargaming, and it was so at the time that would be, like the little chits on the grids and stuff like that. But he had the D&D Red Box. This would have been like 1979, maybe 78, but a long time ago. And he just ran the neighborhood kids through an adventure, and my head exploded. I was hooked. I would be over at their house every weekend playing the old school Dungeon board game, which they reprinted a few years back. Terrible game, no balance whatsoever, and thoroughly just as a kid, I loved it, right? Go in the door, it's a dragon, I'm a thief, right? Like, I got to roll 12 on 2d6, but I would still try to do that. I'm like, I'm going to straight to level 6 as the rogue. I'm going to win the game in one treasure haul.
Because how much cooler was that than a game like Sorry? Or what were your alternatives back then?
Oh my gosh,
right?
Trouble. Yeah, Sorry, Monopoly. No, it blew my mind. Well, and then that's the I met my wife, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I like board games," and I was like, "Cool." Our first date, we went out and played board games, and she was like, "I've never seen board games like this," and she loves them, right?
Yeah.
So, just ever since I was a little kid, Dungeons and Dragons got me into reading and like really spurred me as I was always an artist. As much as a 8-year-old can be, but just like blew my imagination wide open and never ever stopped. Right, like went from there to comic books to more advanced gaming, and I'm that forever game master just about.
Oh, I hear you. Oh boy.
Actually, the pandemic has been great for me getting to play instead of GM.
How did you
So I've
manage
been
that? Because I still ended up in the GM seat because we had so much stuff to test. I'm like, okay, we got to keep play testing stuff.
so I did run Masticator Gate for playtesting, but otherwise I just had some good friends that I was running a Pathfinder and then a D&D campaign for. But when I do it, I go all out. Like I have Dwarven Forge and I love miniatures and miniatures painting. The second desk back is my miniature painting station. Um, so like I have huge setups and I love that stuff. Now I love playing without it as well, but that's how I play. So when my home games ended because of the pandemic, people were like, "Well, we still want to play," and I was like, "Run something." So yeah, I got into a long running OSE game, old school essentials game, and it's probably the most fun RPG that I remember being a player in my entire life.
Really?
Probably because yeah, we're having a blast. The GM is uh, super good, and it's with a bunch of my old. It's really a bunch of my old coworkers from Privateer Press, and then a newer friend. But other, so we're all like industry people, and just having a great time.
But that's it. When you get a good group, it almost doesn't matter what the hell you're playing. You could be playing like pretty much any
Exactly.
system, and you've got a really good group of friends that are gelling, good chemistry on the table, good humor. Everyone understands everyone, and just like, oh yeah,
Yeah, they
magic.
collectively build the story,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you can play the best game in the world, but with if it's with people that aren't gelling, it's not great, right? You can play with zero rules and have a great time
Yeah.
with the right crew.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like having the right group that has the same mindset so that whenever you're playing, it's fun. No matter what game you play, it's always nice. So, how did you get into this industry also? Since I know you've liked this since you were, I guess, very young, but how did you get into the industry?
I always wanted to, do comic books or something like that, right? Be an illustrator. But no, it was when third edition D&D came out, and I had the new player's handbook for the first time. And I flipped it open, and I'm like, there are rules for the first time ever that I recall. I think there was a supplement in second edition AD&D, but where you use miniatures on a grid. But there were zero products that were, other than the fold out map in the back of the player's handbook, that were grids to play with your miniatures on. So I thought up a product. When I was a little kid, I had these cardboard cutout ones, but they moved around and stuff. So I came up with product that ended up being calling magnetic adventure tiles. I had no clue what I was doing, but I made them. They were cool. They were like a detailed grid, and they had different themes, right? So there was like a crypt and I can't even remember. There were three sets. And I scraped together some money, got a little bit of a loan from my parents, and this would have been 2001.
So this is before
Um,
Kickstarter, absolutely. Yeah. So
oh
you're
yes, yeah,
bootstrapping this project yourself.
yes. And I got them manufactured, and I got myself a booth at Origins. And I had no clue, and I showed up, right? And I was like, "Here's my stuff. I don't know anything about taking credit cards. It's cash only. I have the laminated metallic, like black laminated like sheet metal boards, and then you put the magnets on them, and you can build your thing." Um, and people went nuts for them. They absolutely loved them, right? Like that. Like we made really good money at that show, and then I had a booth at Gen Con, 6 weeks later, and we did great. And I did those two shows 2 years in a row. The problem was it was critically successful, but like the board for it was huge, and people were worried about the price point, and it didn't fold right because it was the way it was. It was kind of in a frame, and so like it was really hard to get it picked up through distribution and stuff like that. So ultimately, it was a failure in that regards. So I mean, I paid off my print run. I made some profit. Like I didn't really lose money, but uh, it just kind of fell apart, right?
It
And
didn't
and
it
so
didn't fund the next iteration of R&D.
Correct. Yeah, like it really spiked, but then it kind of fell apart. But then at that time, I discovered at the time was RPG Now. So currently drive
Mm,
through RPG.
yeah.
So I started releasing PDF tile sets, and that went bonkers. But the thing about showing up to Origins, this is how I got into the industry. The thing about showing up to Origins was when I got there and I had a booth and I had a product, in the eyes of all the other exhibitors, I was a gaming professional. Like I had professional quality graphics, and that was it. That was all they needed to know. Suddenly, I was just in. Like everybody was talking to me. We were going out and grabbing dinner. They were like, "Do you want to be involved in this project?" Blah blah blah. Like I got a writing gig for White Wolf, and they never looked at one of my writing projects. They never looked at any of my writing. There's like, "Hey, yeah, do you want to be in on this book?" It was for their old Sword and Sorcery Studios imprint, doing the Scarred Lands
Oh, I
stuff.
remember the Scarred Land stuff. Yeah,
Um, and so we did a book called Wilderness and Wastelands. I wrote two of the chapters, and the art director contacted me and was like, "Hey, we need you to do sketches for the maps for your swamp encounter and your desert encounter." I wrote the swamp and the desert chapters. Uh, and I was like, "Cool, I'll do those up." And I sent him along, and he was like, "Hey, your map sketches are so good. We're just going to publish them, and can you do the other maps for the other
other
authors' chapters
books.
too?" And so I got like three more writing jobs for White Wolf after that, and
They
like
didn't know you were an
400
author.
cartography jobs.
They didn't know you were an artist. They thought you were just a
No,
writer. Is that it?
yeah, because I
Yep.
didn't, it was just this Joseph Carricker was the one that hired me to work on that project. He's one of the developers for Green Ronin now.
That's hilarious. So
Um,
this author can actually draw. That's crazy.
yeah,
Little
and
did
so it was
they
like I
know
got a
that's where
couple.
you started.
Yeah, well, I had no writing experience. I'd
Yeah.
written my own campaign. They didn't ask. I was like, okay, well, I'll just do a good job here and see what happens. And right, honestly, I'm a pretty slow writer. I think I'm a good writer, but I'm not fast, right? Like, I mean, the Masticator Gate, I didn't even write that solo, and it took me way longer than it probably should have.
Did you prefer writing or drawing? I figured probably drawing more, but
Oh, for
you've
sure, drawing. Like, I wanted to be an artist my whole life. I still want to be an artist.
so so you draw maps mostly, but what was like the I think catalyst that made you decide that you wanted to draw maps and not like other things, like regular artworks? Like what was the main catalyst?
The main catalyst was I could quit my crappy day job as a graphic designer doing corporate BS, and I could work in the fantasy world and make my money like that. So I was instantly good at it because it gelled illustration with graphic design. Making maps is as much graphic design, and that was my background. So that's like my career before getting in the game industry was I was a graphic designer, right? Like I was doing corporate logos, and I worked in I lived in Reno, Nevada for a while, so I was doing like a lot of casino like VIP invitations for $1 million craps tournaments and stuff like that. Funny story. I did the graphic design on the Tyson Holyfield invite for MGM for the fight that Tyson bit off Holyfield's ear.
Oh,
Uh, I,
really?
I, I,
That's
I
so
did
cool.
the graphic design for the invite for the high rollers for that event.
There
That's
were any,
actually
no ear motifs in that one.
No, we didn't know that. We
No
didn't know that was going to
premonition.
happen. No, I would have thrown one in if I had been invited back to design it for the
Uh, the
the
comeback,
follow
the
up fight.
part two.
Yeah.
So for the cartography, like when you end up putting together a map for, let's say, a city like Tolis, or
I did do the
a
map for Tullus.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then
okay.
if you do, let's say, a dungeon or a wilderness scene, um, what are the different considerations that you need to think about as a cartographer when doing a one of those kinds of maps for minis, um, versus just maybe like a map for a centerpiece?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, so a lot of it depends on if I'm doing it for myself or if I'm doing it for the client. So if I'm doing it for a client, I definitely want to follow their brief. I usually ask for a sketch, and then I will give them feedback on their sketch, like these don't make sense, and sometimes they're like, well, that's canon, right? Like that's how it has to be or whatever. When I'm doing my own stuff, I get a lot more freedom. So it's like I just have this cool idea and I can choose the detail level. And I admit when I first started freelancing and doing stuff for like what was it called? Whatever it was before it was Frog God Games.
It was Necromancer Games, no?
Necromancer Games.
Necromancer?
Yeah, Necromancer Games. I was putting way too much detail in the little maps, right?
Yeah.
But I got a lot of award nominations and a couple of wins. So I guess I was doing something right. But for me, I was like, no, this is way too much. You don't need to show every little thing on a quarter-inch grid. But on my miniature scale grids, right, like I could go nuts. And it got to the point where I was putting in so much detail, even with the ones I've done in the past couple of years, because I did a Kickstarter for some not too long ago that went over really well. But it was like, wow, these take a lot longer than they used to because I'm really feeding it with a lot of detail. But I had a huge library of assets, right? So it's like, oh, well, I need a couple scrolls. I can grab those scrolls.
So this is digital, right? So you've got a bunch of clip art that you've got in your Photoshop, I guess as brushes or whatnot that you can pull in and just stamp it around.
Yeah, or assets that I've actually built in, with full shading and rendering and detail, but that I can pull in and rotate and then put them underneath a layer of cobwebs or something like that. And,
Got it.
General stuff. I've got an urn. Uh, I got 10 urns. They're different sizes. I can pull them in. I can switch the color. I can add a little bit of detail if I want something like that. Problem was, I started doing that in 2001. And in 2015, I'm like, my art style it has evolved. Like I look at those old miniature scale maps and I'm like, ugh, like I mean they still sell, and I think they're still good, but they have an aesthetic that I no longer enjoy doing as an artist. So
And
I
has the
relaunched as like second edition adventure tiles, and I just kind of got to start fresh, right? So here is what the new dungeons look like, and they're much more textured and they look less because there's a little bit of a cartoony style to the older stuff, and so I've evolved, right? I mean, it's been 20 years
yeah.
since I started doing this, and it was getting stale to try to keep doing more of the same.
And I'm curious because I know that in press the DPI has evolved as well. So when I first started 10 years ago doing just the print runs, everything was done in 300 DPI. But now when you're looking at things, everything's getting future proofed. You need to ask your artist for everything in 600 DPI because that's where the press is going. We're going to higher and higher resolutions. Did you find that from 20 years ago? Was this like everything was more like a 150 DPI, the original assets, and
So what? I have an opinion on this. Um, Screw 600 DPI. Like the the print quality and the human eye and what it can detect. I'm not doing my stuff at 600. I'm just not. Like it it creates lag time, it creates larger files, especially when if I'm working on like a huge mat, like neoprene mat, which I've done for some clients. Like no way. There's tricks if they really need it that big that you can scale it up and run what's called a high pass and an overlay on it, and they'll never know. Right. So for me, that level of fidelity is, um, I think that the technology has surpassed the practical need for it to actually keep up with the technology. So all the stuff I provide printers is 300, and I have never had a single complaint, including my own views on how it turned out.
interesting.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm gonna be real. I don't have to deal with that type of situation. I've never had to worry about print runs and stuff like that, so I really don't understand the situation when it comes to that. But I do agree where it comes to looking at the quality of stuff. I don't think you require that big of files, especially when it comes to for personal. Whenever I do any type of regular editing on the computer, Having bigger files mean longer render times, and that definitely will affect the usage time. I guess it's the same when it comes to making books and stuff like that. But that being said, I'm just curious. So we're going to talk about more your artist background, since we did mention that you did enjoy your artwork a lot. So let's talk about like the companies you worked for and stuff like that. So you worked at White Wolf, you work at Necromancer Gaming, Onyx Publishing, and for people who are new, tell them something that like you learned there that you can kind of recommend to these newer people.
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is, just to be clear, I was a contractor for those
Contractor,
companies.
yes.
But when I first started out, I was going to, even though I stopped going to conventions as Skeleton Key Games, I started just going as Ed Bourelle, artist, cartographer, writer, right? And I put on a nice shirt, and I looked like I looked like I was there to be professional, gaming professional. So I didn't go too nuts, right? But so I got out there, I met art directors. What was the question?
Just what did you learn from working with all these different companies? Because obviously,
as a contractor,
as a contractor.
So, I mean, really, one of the things I learned was trying to think how to put this in the gaming industry. I hope none of my former art directors take this the wrong way. But sometimes about certain subject matter, you know way more than your art director, right? Like if you've been doing this for a long time and they're just sort of filling in or whatever. And it's not necessarily that I knew way more, but I learned to, if you can impress your art director with the first draft, there is no second draft. I was turning stuff in and they were like, this is great, approved. When I worked as an art director, that never happened. I was just like, oh, can we fix this? Let's do this. Let's tweak this. So I work with some great people, and I just built up trust with them, right? And then don't miss your deadlines in order to maintain those relationships, and you'll be set. Like I was at one time, I counted, and I was doing an average of 6 or 7 books. I was publishing content, so maps or illustrations once in a while. It's probably like 80% cartography, 20% illustration, in 6 to 7 books a month for White Wolf alone. So it was, and it was like this. You do good with one art director, and it's a big enough company. They're like, oh, hey, the art directors talk. They go to lunch together. So it was kind of like make good with one and just like let it branch out, but then I would take my portfolio and I would get out there when I could to conventions. As a matter of fact, at the time I never had an online portfolio ever, actually, in my life. And I never emailed an art director. I always went to cons and just chatted them up in person or got it through word of mouth from other art directors.
Yeah, I honestly believe that one of the most underrated things, not just in, I guess, in your field, but in most fields in the world, is the connections, right? You have to talk to people. You have to keep a good relationship with multiple people, because those people might know other people, or those people are future connections as well. Yep. And as well as having deadlines, right? Following those deadlines, making sure you have them on time is important, because not only you might think it's okay, a couple of days for me, it's not a big deal, but it pushes everything back. And if everybody goes a couple of days, that can push back the project. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to learn, especially if you're in any type of field, right? Deadlines, very important, and connections. And yeah, you can't just sit home and be like, I'm going to make projects and not have any connection, because you're not going to grow from that. So
I miss my own deadlines all the time, but I prioritize my clients' deadlines over that. These days, I don't take on too much contract work.
But your reputation is king in a small industry, and like the tabletop industry is very small. Like everyone knows everyone, and and people talk, and people are very open to share, manufacturers that they've worked with that are very good, or oh, I need an artist that's very good. They'll talk about, so and so does really good work and they're available, and or a cartographer, a writer, an editor. Oh, editors. Oh yeah, those are well guarded secrets mostly. I think those are the ones that people are least
if you ever need
to.
any,
Yeah, I do.
I've worked with some magnificent ones.
Our current Kickstarter, can you imagine the word count in this anthology with all of the books that we're releasing? 9 books. We're talking in the millions of words. So I do have a couple of editors on staff, but nowhere near enough. So yes, definitely.
I can pass you some names.
Yes, please.
Awesome.
Off the top of my head, I've got 3 that are highly, highly trusted.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Okay, that
I
would
worked
be
with all of them at Privateer Press. So.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
No, that'd
All
be
right. So anyway, that can be for a conversation for another time, I guess, since we're gonna get multiple people
but just
on board.
To piggyback on your question that you were asking about, like the tricks and tips of someone contracting in a company. I was going to ask one more from the artist's perspective, in terms of what are some of the things that when an artist applies for a position in the tabletop industry, just for example, like when I get someone, let's say that's a writer that applies in the tabletop industry, and they come from magazines or newspapers, there are a couple of things that are just shockingly different in the tabletop industry that they need to know about, right? So, so you've been on the art side. What would be something, let's say, if an artist was watching, that would be kind of the unknown top 3 things, lesser known things that they would need to be aware of if they were applying in the tabletop industry for the first time?
For an art job, okay. So I think one big one is definitely know the publisher's material, right? Like you're not going to be doing art for Fate of the Norns that you're going to be doing for Morkborg or something like that, right? Or even just standard D&D. So make sure what you're doing aligns with their products. Um, Even if it's something that's a little older, or like they have if they have an RPG that you don't line up with, but they have a card game that you do that's a little bit more your style. Just make sure to highlight your knowledge of that, right? So that's one. Know the products. 2, honestly, just to get your stuff out there. Don't be afraid to just sort of shotgun blast everywhere. I say that like, oh, know what they're doing and make sure it matches, but reach out to any art directors that you can find, and get your portfolio in front of them, because a good portfolio review from a professional, especially if you're just starting out, can be valuable. If you hear things you don't like, am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah. Go
Tough,
ahead.
tough shit,
Yeah.
right? Listen to what they have to say. Don't be like they don't know what they're talking about. Um, because I've had artists come back to me and I would tell them the same thing every year, and I'm like, look, this is the 3rd year in a row, and you haven't listened to a thing I've said. So I don't ever want to see your portfolio again until you've done what I've told you. At least some of what I've told you is gonna, yeah, because otherwise it's just wasting my time. Um,
And when you said approach art directors, would you recommend that they approach them online, like email the art director a portfolio, or at a show to approach them at the booth, let's say, with their portfolio in hand? What would be
Either will work. Either will work. Um, at a live show is your best chance of it getting an actual portfolio review instead of just a "we're sorry, your style doesn't quite fit," right? So at Gen Con, I would spend an entire day every year when I was with Privateer doing portfolio reviews one after the other, and gave pretty in-depth ones. And the funny thing is, like, the things I'm telling these people to do, I can't do myself. Like my style of art
do you
was
know what you
never
need?
the privateer style of art.
Yeah.
However, I have a lot of experience as an art director and a creative director, so I know what I'm looking at and I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And if you can't give it to me, I know how to explain to you what you need to do to give it to me. Um, so listen to the feedback, right? It's not always fun, but it will improve you. And then number 3, so just keep evolving and follow up, really, because if you get turned down,
Yep.
that doesn't mean that
Don't give
as
up.
your new stuff progresses, because that's what the other thing I would always say is, like, when you have some new stuff, hit me up, because I think you're close, right? Like, you're 80% there. Here's my feedback. Show me what else you got. So keeping in touch with art directors, or even sometimes I would see an artist as an art director that I really liked, and I'd be like, I love your stuff. Hit me up. We don't actually have anything for what you do right now, but I would love to keep you in the mind for the future because we have some upcoming projects.
Exactly.
So just I can't stress, like, the communication and the relationships enough. You don't have to be the best if you're on time and they just like you, right? Like,
Yeah, you have to be a good communicator and understand ideas and be able to synthesize those ideas on paper and be able to
yes,
get them back without going, oh, I finished the entire piece. They're like, that's not what we were looking for. Where's the sketch that we asked for before you went to colors?
yeah,
Um,
that's always fun. I'm like, nope, we have to redo all this.
yeah, no,
You
it's one of the things that I always do is whenever I'm at a show is I will take, a good part of my Sunday to walk down Artist Alley, and I will look for, as you know, Fate of the Norns, we've got a very, very specific aesthetic, and I will be looking for those artists that pop, that are completely different than everyone else in Artist Alley. And even if I see, the regular stuff, but they've got one piece that just this was that one piece that they did that was different than everything else. I'll zero in on that and be like, who did this? Let me talk to the artist. Can you replicate this again?
right?
And
Yes. Have you done anything else like
yeah,
this? Or is there more of
exactly.
the portfolio?
Yep.
But you actually maybe even one of the number one things of the list of 3. What you said reminded me of something, because I've hired 3 artists, and I found out later they all came from the same school. um, because in their portfolio and in their presentation, because I actually interviewed them in person, they showed their process. If you can show your process,
Yep.
here's my 5 thumbnails. Here's the one I picked. Here's why I picked it. Here's the first pass, right? And then here's the finished colors, textures, line, whatever it is, right? Oh man, nothing impresses an art director more than showing a really good process, because then they know what they're working with. And they know, like, they can even say, like, well, this is the stage where I would talk to you about making adjustments and corrections, right? So if you can show a full life cycle of a couple of your best pieces of art directors fawn over that shit. They love it.
And right now, technology is your friend as an artist because you can put all of this on YouTube and
Yep.
go take a look at this one video or actually go through my entire process from start of concept. Here are the requirements that came in for this art piece. This is what I ended up sending back to my client. This was the feedback I got. These are the changes that I made. This is the further feedback. This is the final product.
Showing how you work really tells a lot. And, like, so a lot of my work now, my initial work, I like to finish my stuff traditionally, but a lot of my sketches start out in Procreate on my iPad. Procreate automatically creates a time lapse video.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can play back every piece of art I've ever made in Procreate.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
Take screenshots from it, or just put it up, right? Show, like, this is, and just show it, right? This is where I screwed it up. This is me erasing like 3/4 of everything, right? Or making a new layer and tracing back over it. That
Nice.
kind of stuff. Showing that you have that foundation is, it's immeasurable in its value, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Yeah, I totally agree as well. All right, so we've talked about your art quite a bit, so we're gonna jump to your I guess your main gig, I say in quotation mark, but let's talk about your written stuff, because it's not what you love doing, but we've done it, and when the first time you did it, I think it was a funny story. Let's talk about what you have written. Some of the stuff that you've written in general.
Honestly, I haven't written a ton. So
Okay.
I started out with a couple White Wolf gigs, and it was all for their third edition D&D crossover stuff. I did some writing for Fantasy Flight Games. Again, they did a series called Legends and Layers. So it's like I wrote a bunch of traps for their Traps and Treachery book. I wrote an entire chapter on alchemy for their like one of their sorcery book. I can't remember what it was called. A couple more. I think I worked on some of their monster books and stuff like that. And then fast forward to Privateer Press. When I was freelancing before I actually worked for them, I was doing a lot of design work on their organized play. So I'm a big miniatures gamer. Kind of actually got out of RPGs for a while and totally immersed in miniatures gaming.
What's your favorite miniatures game?
Presently, it's called This Is Not a Test.
Haven't heard of that.
It's a post-apocalyptic skirmish game by Joseph McCullough.
Okay.
If you've seen the super popular like Blaster magazine on our Drive-Thru RPG, anyway, it's totally awesome. So ones that you may have heard of, like I really like Relic Blade, which is another indie one for big stuff, like GW games. I'm super into Necromunda.
Okay, old school.
The crazy gang skirmish. I don't love the 40K war game itself, because the scope is just so big.
And it's heavy with all the books.
Yeah, with Necromunda, it focuses it down on a single planet and like the small gang skirmishes in their big hive cities. And so I love it. Like I've got a lot.
That's why I loved called Mage Knight. You remember Mage Knight from HeroClix? Yep. Those small skirmish, you didn't even need the books. Everything was on the little dial. Yep. So brilliant.
They remade that, right? They remade that Mage Knight. I know it was like a long time ago they made it, but then they remade it in like the only reason I know this because my cousin's really into board game and he's like, "Oh my god, Mage Knight!" So it was like
it's a board game, I think they made.
Yeah.
They turned it into a board game.
They remade it into a board game for I guess the average consumer. But yeah, I love me. I played a lot of Privateer Press, War Machine, and Hordes. I was really much a Horde player. I did not enjoy the 40K. It's just too many models. I like playing the ones where you had like a few models and you play with those. That was absolutely fun.
But I'm sure Ed loves painting the stuff though. So I mean that's
that's my zen almost. Every night, for like an hour before I go to bed, I sit back there and I paint models. It's just totally like I'll put on a podcast or an audiobook and just it's how I unwind from a day, and it's great.
I'm so bad at painting. I tried and my hands just shakes too much. It was not my forte. I think my minis were just all primed and I just put like paint on it and it was terrible. My friends were like, "What are you doing?" But yeah, but double back into RPG. What is like, since we talked about what you learned from being an artist, what did you learn from writing in comparison, I guess, or just what did you learn in general from writing?
Well, so when I write, and then I'll say this, I'll carry it over to when I design a product. My main goal is to try to show the consumer or the client something that they have not seen before, right? Or something that at least has not been applied to that kind of product. So whether it's the plot twist or just taking an approach where it feels fresh. You're not just rehashing the good, the bad, and the ugly again, or something like that, right?
It was a great movie, though.
And that's not always easy to do, to try to find something that's unique, but at least a unique spin.
Well, that's great to hear because we've got you as a stretch goal guest writer on our latest Kickstarter.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we've got an adventure by Ed. If we hit stretch goals, which I think we will. Our first day has been decent. And so why don't you give our listeners maybe an idea of maybe something's cooking up there, maybe, of an adventure in Athcliath, Ed's city.
With Athcliath being an urban Dark Ages environment, right? I was toying with the idea of a serial killer. Right. So an adventure centered around a serial killer, but maybe it's not what it seems. Right. So and I don't know the answer to. It's not what it seems.
let's
Right.
let's
So I
not
either
put the
have
spoiler out here.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'm toying with a lot of ideas. Right. Like, is the serial killer actually killing things that people don't know are evil, but people don't know? Is the serial killer some kind of fey connection? That it's actually killing changelings. Or, I don't know. And also, I don't have the design briefs yet either, so I don't know what
Didn't I
I
send
can.
it to you? I
I
didn't
don't.
send it to you.
Uh,
Hold
let's
on.
see. I got. Please add me to your LinkedIn network. No, I haven't got it yet.
Oh my goodness, here it comes. Sending it
But
right
so
now.
anyway, so right now, what's popping in my head is
Yep,
some kind of serial killer adventure centered around a serial killer.
got it. That's going to be cool because I've got a couple of the authors already that have sent me their ideas. Don't have a serial killer Sherlock Holmes try to figure out who's bumping people off in Athcliath. So that's going to be a nice unique one, I think. And while we're
Yeah,
on
and
the, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't think I've ever played an adventure ar- around that. And there's been a lot of adventures published, so there's probably one out there, but I haven't seen it.
No, that'd be very
What's
very cool.
what's the stretch goal at? Do you know, Andrew? The stretch goal? Like,
I
what's the stretch
haven't
goal?
set the amounts yet because I mean it really
Okay.
comes down to the velocity of the Kickstarter. So I've done enough
Okay.
Kickstarters to realize, like, I don't know if you guys were around for the Ogre Kickstarter. So when Steve Jackson Games set this one up, they they were afraid. I think they had put, I don't know if memory serves me right, they had put like 25,000, and they were thinking, oh, there's no way we're going to make 25,000. And then they put like 100 stretch goals between 25,000 and 30,000 or something. And they were like, maybe we can get 26,000 or maybe 27,000 or
An
something.
hour.
And in like 1 hour, they were like 100,000 or something. And it was just like they had blown through everything, and they had to come up with a ton more. And it was the joke of the century where they had blown past their wildest expectations, and all of the stretch goals were just gone instantly. And
I am debating doing my next Kickstarter with little to no stretch goals. Because in ones I've done in the past, I'm like, I've designed the product. Now let me subtract 10% out of the product and call it stretch goals. But it's planned. It's going in there, right? Like I don't know. It's tricky, right? For in this instance, right? Like
in this
you
instance, we
haven't done
had
that because I haven't written anything and I haven't,
exactly.
so
Yeah,
so I mean they're true stretch goals, but I mean I have sort of padded things with like these are I definitely know these are going to unlock, which is great because I need this deck of cards to be 54 cards. Even though I only started it at 42 or whatever.
right.
Uh, so not to pull the blanket or whatever the curtain aside to show the wizard, but for me, so I'm debating like on my next project, do I want to run like, hey, we're going to do a couple things, which is like maybe a paper quality upgrade or something like that, but we're not going to add more content because the content's ready to go. And that's the other thing. I'm printing my next project domestically, so I'm going to be like
A lot of
turn to
people
burn.
are. A lot of people
Yeah.
are.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm sourcing. Like I'm getting a bunch of quotes locally now. North America and Quebec. Uh, it's just the supply chain is crazy. I've just had a couple more backers message me today, like, "Hey, what's going on with the last Kickstarter? Like the print on demand people have gotten their books, but the ones that are getting it shipped to the door are still waiting." And I'm like, what can I tell you? I'm watching the tracking of the books trying to get
Yeah.
the fulfillment hub, and they're like stuck in Cincinnati for like 3 weeks. They're just sitting there. They're not going
Yeah.
anywhere. They've
Oh,
moved
and
to that spot, and they're just stuck.
I love my big board games with lots of plastic pieces. I'm not backing any of that stuff right now, right? Because I've got projects that are that wrapped up before the pandemic, and they're still waiting, and they're just like, yeah, it's sitting on, waiting on a container, or it's floating off of the port, of it in LA, or it's in Seattle in the middle of a 30,000 large stack of containers, right?
Yep.
Like I've got a publisher friend who, well, I won't go into too much detail, but their
buried.
their crate was delivered to the port of Seattle, but they're moving 2,000 into the port a day, but only trucking 500 out. And they're like, "Yep, we're pretty sure it's in the middle of that pile, and we can honestly say we know it's here, but we don't have any idea where." I don't know.
That's what
I
it's
don't know
coming
how
down
much of
to.
that's going on in the U.S., but
It's the mentality that's going to have to change, because I know some companies that have flashed the greenbacks, and their containers have miraculously appeared out of the zoo of can't find your container. So I think like what has happened in other countries, that mentality is slowly going to start seeping into North America as money will make things move faster.
only had a couple experiences with that at Comic-Con San Diego, big Comic-Con, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can pass a little cash over to the Teamsters, and they'll dig your crates out faster, because you can be sitting there after the show ends for 5 hours and not be able to pack your stuff up because it's back there somewhere, and you just be like, here, and it's not huge amounts of money, right? But still, it's like $80. Here's 20 for you and 20 for each of 3 forklift drivers to go find our shit.
Yep.
And now I will never be able to have a booth at Comic because I just said that.
No, now it'll be the highest bidder. Now that we got a bunch of industry people to watch this after, so it'll be other booths are going to be like, "Oh, well, he's paying 20. We'll give him 25."
You're welcome, Teamsters.
That's what's going to happen. Right. So on the Athkaliath, before we move off the Athkaliath, Ken, I wanted Ed's opinion on our Athkaliath map, because we've got a cartographer here. So we've got the map there, but it's hard to see. It is in 600 DPI in the original format. So, but it's horribly scaled down, but you can see it in the update. I've got a little bit of a zoom in on the Kickstarter update.
I knew I saw a zoom in somewhere.
Yeah. So we've got a new cartographer that we ended up hiring for this project. And we had gotten to the point of Ed was like a stickler for details for the buildings, and he was like, I want slate buildings, I want thatch building roofs, I want hay roofs, I want, wood roofs. And so the guy went to town on actually just detailing every single one of the roofs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, we've got an honest to God cartographer on the stream here. So we're gonna talk the Athkaliath map, because we're gonna probably need some more maps too.
I think it looks great. Like, honestly, like, it brings me back to when I worked on Tullus. And honestly, if I did that map now, I would do it a lot differently. And honestly, I'd probably do it closer to what you've got here, which is mainly a little less Photoshop filtery. Yeah, I have to remind myself that I've been in the industry for 20 years now, and I did that map 15 years ago.
Right.
So at least it's been a while. No, I actually, I think it's fabulous, right? And I think that the city design itself, when I look back at the not just the details, right, but the overall view, is that it has the realistic shape and form of an actual city, right? It looks very real world, right? Like it belongs.
And that's one of the things that Ed brings to the entire project. He has done so many cities, and he is such a scholar of medieval studies in terms of just how society was organized. When he and I sit down on our weekly calls for what are we doing next, what's in this city block, what are we putting together here, I mean, he's thinking of everything, and like, how's the sewage getting taken out of the city? How's the food being brought in? How's the incarceration being done? How's the taxation? Where's the money being stored? It's just like every little detail of the city is being thought of, and then all of those details are also then passed off to like everyone else that touches the city, myself and the cartographer and everyone else. So it's it's quite an interesting project, and I couldn't think of a better person to work on a city box set than Ed. Like, he was just my number one pick, and boom, amazing.
That's great. No, I yeah, when you told me you guys were working together, I was like a little bit jealous. I gotta be honest. That's pretty cool.
Well, now we're all working together. You're on this too.
Right.
We're gonna hit the stretch goals.
For sure. Yeah,
Oh,
we're on good
I'm
pace.
not worried about it. Like, yeah, all your campaigns have all been amazing. So
Thank you.
All right, we talked enough about our own stuff.
Yes.
Let's talk about your company. You founded Skeleton Key Games, and we didn't really talk about it earlier in the beginning. But tell us, the viewers, what do you do primarily, and what does the future for the company hold?
Okay, so primarily when I started, so let's say the first 15 years of Skeleton Key Games was miniature scale map tiles, right? We started with magnetic, we went to digital, then we went into print on demand. At Drive Through RPG, we literally have 200 different sets of them that I've done over the years. In the early days, I was always one of the top sellers. Like there weren't that many of us. There's a lot more now. But from there, I took a long hiatus, working with Privateer. And when I came back, I had been in miniatures for so long, right? Like over 8 years with them, that I had to kind of reconnect with my RPG roots and get back in with the RPG customer base, the RPG industry base. So what do we do? When I quit my job, I told my wife, I was kind of like, here's what I want to do. I want to basically do whatever I think is cool in any given moment, and I want it to pay my bills. And she's like, well, let's try it. So the first thing I did was the very first Kickstarter I ever did was for a scroll called the Scroll of Eldritch Convocation. So one of my primary revenue streams, my primary projects, is that I was like, okay, uh, I'm an artist, right? I'm a slow writer, so it's going to be hard for me to do a lot of words without collaborators. What can I do that combines my illustration and graphic design background? And at the time, uh, there was like a whole lot of these campaign coins coming out.
Well, yeah.
So like, and I was like, okay, well, what the hell are people doing with those, right? They're cool. They collect them. They use them at their game table. I was like, okay, so what's the Skeleton Key Games version of that? And I was flipping through the player's handbook, and I was like, spell scrolls, right? Like there's hundreds of spells in the games. So I did one that wasn't related to D&D. I decided to dive into the Cthulhu mythos realm and just do one that would attract them, just to see if I could do it, because I do one scroll, and it's like all hand finished, hand weathered. So it's printed, but then I decal the edges, literally like tear them by hand. I have like a special aluminum straight edge that I dremeled so that it's not straight anymore. So I'm hand tearing all four edges of every single scroll, um, soak it in a weathering solution, put it out on these drying racks that have evolved since those days of doing it like on my kitchen table. And then I hand illuminate everything, right? Like do a little hand finish. And in the early on, it was very complicated, but those were I did the Make 100 Kickstarter, so that I was like, if it goes gangbusters, I still don't shoot myself in the foot because I don't have to do 100 of them, right? It's just a test. And I only did 62. But the process for making them was sound, and it worked great. So I was like, okay, let's do it again. But this time I focused on spells from D&D, and branded it as such, first level arcane scrolls. And then I got picked up by Geek and Sundry in a front page article. And so I was all excited because like halfway through my campaign, I was at like $4,000.
Go blow up.
And then the Geek and Sundry article went up, and it was like $11,000 in 90 minutes, 11,000 more dollars in 90 minutes. And then it went on to do almost 40 grand, right?
Beautiful.
So it's like, okay, it works. Great. Now I have a lot of work to do. So, but those are, do I have any example? I have some.
They're gorgeous. They're really nice.
These are all in progress stuff, so it's not, right? But see, so these are like my test art on a new set, right? And I'm trying, this is the scrying scroll. So I'm like, do I want the big eye in the middle with the crystal ball in the center? Or do I not want the eye and just have the crystal ball? and just like experimenting with different colors and stuff. Um, Still
And
experimenting
do
there.
you know who we need to put Ed in touch with? Kafir. Kafir with his leather maps and his leather
Oh,
scrolls.
those
So
things are awesome.
if
No,
you
they were
if
the
you
booth
watched it,
right behind us, I think.
yes. So he was right behind you at Gamehole Con. I don't know if you ended
Yeah,
up talking with him at
I did
all.
not.
He does scrolls as well, and so they just look out of this world, just like his maps that look super
Yeah.
3D. I think the two of you could just—it's like the meeting of Smith and Wesson. I have his contact info. We had him on Fireside Chat. I think the two of you should go and look at scrolls together.
Right on. Right on. But since that first one, we just right before Gamehole Con, a month ago, I guess, um, we had wrapped up the Kickstarter for the fifth and sixth level scrolls. So the next one later in 2022 will be a single Kickstarter for seventh, eighth, and ninth, and that'll kind of wrap up the first go at going all the way through the full levels for Arcane Scrolls.
Beautiful.
But in the meantime, like I said, I just want to be able to come up with stuff and do it. So we did. I have a series of NPC generation cards called dossier decks, and it's you take 3 cards and you lay them out, and it makes a full dossier. So it's not just draw one card and that's your NPC. It's mix and match sets of cards to generate something that either can be random on the fly or you can plan ahead. Um, just have so
Yeah.
I'm
Do you have
sitting
some
here.
samples? Yeah.
So we've got like the merchant deck and the commoner deck. Let me open one up and I can show you how it works.
Yeah, it's super
So
cool. I went by
each
Ed's booth and those things just popped right in. Like I just couldn't stop. I was just, tell me about these decks.
so
They
each
look
deck
super useful for anyone
is
running a game.
divided into 3 sub decks, right? So you've got your appearances, your traits, and your story hooks. And the idea is that you will draw one of each, turn them around, and they kind of line up. So they're meant to, if you want, you can put them in like a card binder, right? And so 3 wide, you get your complete NPC. So you get your art, you get their personality traits, so how they're going to interact in different situations, where their expertise is, and where they're clueless. And then you get a little story hook that usually revolves around an object or a place. So if you need a little side quest or something like that to fill some time, you can do that. Uh,
And you've
and then
got
so we've
this
got
by setting, right? Like I think by genre or by setting.
uh, right now it's sort of by NPC type. So there's 4 decks. There's commoners, merchants, mages, and then orcs and goblins. So and then they go from like commoners. So the like the traits are very simple. The story hooks aren't super over the top. Um, you go to mages and it gets a little bit more exotic, and then you go to orcs and goblins and it's just crazy, right? So, but you can mix and match all the decks. So if you want your commoner, you got some halfling farmer, but you pull a goblin trait and suddenly he's like a mushroom licking pyromaniac, right? So all the decks can be shuffled together, but then each set has like a little set symbol and they're on each card. So you can put them back into their respective decks if you don't want to continuously keep them, kind of shuffled together or whatever. And then we have more decks in the works. We're trying to figure out scheduling because these decks I had printed in China, and as I said earlier, I'm going domestic now, so I'm working on getting some sample decks to try to find matching size, corner radius, and card stock, right? So that the decks again can be combined together.
You
And
have
I think we're getting pretty close.
in terms of your themes, so you had like commoners and mages. How about like Celtic nobles or Viking invaders? Any of that in the works? Because I mean, that could be added
Anything's
on as
possible.
extras that our backers could just order, and we can order that from you and just do that as fulfillment. Like we'll be a reseller for those decks.
I mean, let's chat because anything's possible. I'll be honest. The next deck that we have closest to being finished is nobles, but it is not Celtic nobles.
All right.
It's more your universal fantasy novels.
Okay, well, we'll have to take a look at that because I mean, obviously, where there's synergies, I mean, it's a win-win situation.
Well,
Oh,
speaking of speaking of
100%.
decks, aren't we doing something also for City Adventures or something like that, Andrew? Is that something happening? A little collab between you guys? Is that a thing, or am I just making up stuff right now?
Well, Ed was working on a adventure deck. So back in the '90s, he had a Cthulhu project that he was working on.
Other Ed.
Yeah,
Ed Green.
Ed Greenwood. Sorry, that's true.
Like I
I'm like,
was.
wait.
And
He's
so
just making shit up.
and he wanted to add to our Kickstarter an adventure deck. So basically, and even this could be for any setting, you just pull out a story card. The story card's got a bunch of blanks that says like you need to meet a person at a location for a certain type of event, and then you reach into your person deck, pull out a random person, reach into your location deck, pull out a location, and then put a reason for the meeting, and then you've got a story, a quest right there built out. And this is something that we want to add as a stretch goal. But yeah, it's true. Like if you know other RPG designers have got something already similar in the works, then it definitely collabs. Like shorter
I
time to
love
market. You know what I mean?
I love tools like that. They're just like for me as a game master, that kind of stuff is just is so fun.
Yeah.
And certainly right. I mean, it sounds like Mr. Greenwood has his idea for this, right? But if you want a collaborator on it, just we can talk for
Well,
sure.
I like what you've come up with for the Morkborg monsters. Why don't you show that if you've got that handy? Like I fell in
And
love with that when I walked by your booth as well.
all
Uh,
right, so this
why don't you
one,
tell us where that came from as an idea too?
yeah.
Let's
So
date us. Let's date
when I was
viewers.
when I yeah right when I was doing the adventure, I was like, I really like I want that new thing that I keep talking about. Find something people haven't seen before, and so we were demonstrating this at Origins and at Gamehole Con, and like literally as we showed what I'm about to show, people were like, "Oh my god!" Right? Like we've not seen that. So when I was a kid, there was this awesome toy called Mighty Men and Monster Maker, but it was these plastic plates, engraved plastic plates that you put into this frame, and then you laid a piece of paper down and you rubbed sideways with a crayon, and it made a monster. And so there was like a head plate, a body plate, and a leg plate, and it would make superheroes or aliens, kind of whatever you wanted, right? And man, I loved that thing because it was just like, I want to be an artist. I love comic books, and it was just like an instant way to kind of create your own hero or whatever. So I came up with this thing called the Endless Demon Deck. Um, and what it is it's again three sub decks, kind of like what I showed you with the dossier decks. But in this one, you have and sort of the backs line up too. But you have a head deck, a body deck,
Body,
and
legs.
a leg deck. So when you flip these around, you draw the head, and in this case, because it's more board, it literally has the game stats. So in this case, like you put these two together, and you get the Screeching Impaler. And then the bottom one, it doesn't add to the name, but the bottom one has usually like a companion or like traps or something, so that in the adventure in our book, it will tell you where that companion or those traps are in the adventure. So the book itself, um, right here, it has three linked adventures for Morkborg, but the idea is it's the Masticator Gate, right? So all these demons eons ago were trapped by humanity in this prison, but they found a way out, and the way out is the Masticator Gate. But on the way out, before it spits them out into the world, it chews them up and tears them apart. So they're reforming via the Endless Demon deck, into new monsters, the
Love it.
the horned headlopper,
Love it.
right? So everybody's play experience with this campaign is a little bit different. Now, I wouldn't say it has replay value that you can play it again and again, but it just has this uniqueness that's going to be different for everybody. And then you can also use the deck just to generate sort of general monsters for the game. But also in the game, there are times when you will need to draw. You'll have encounters like this one, where you will actually put the card into the book to modify an encounter within the book.
Love it.
That's cool. That's awesome.
So
I've never seen something like that. That's pretty innovative. I like that a lot.
And people were like, "That's crazy, right?" Like that. So just like little innovations that are fun. I like tactile and I like interactive.
And it's visual. It's visually pleasing. Like it's got this beautiful aesthetic to it as well.
Well, when you're done with it, you're just going to sit there and play with it and make demons. You're going to be like, "Oh, well, let me draw another one. Well, let me draw another one." Right? It's just fun, right? And so making toys for, grown-ups. I love it.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm very I like those like unique kind of games, and the fact that like it's not just one thing where you just create monsters, but you can also use it in the book. I love that.
And
but
Ken,
we are getting.
I wanted to pick this up at PAX Unplugged, and Ed says he's not going to be at PAX Unplugged.
You're not going to be there?
When is your next con that we're going to cross paths so I can pick all this stuff up? Because at Game Hole, I flew in with a backpack that was jam-packed full, and I had no room for it. And I told Ed, next con, I'm picking all this stuff up, and I'm driving home with it.
See you at GaryCon.
GaryCon, March. Okay, right. Perfect.
Yep, we'll be at GaryCon in March.
Some drinks together.
Probably be 100%. Probably be running our next Kickstarter in March.
Awesome. All right, so we will link the Kickstarter into the chat if the video's out. Probably going to be out before there, so it'll be linked on YouTube. But we are running out of time. Thank you so much, Ed, for joining us today. Always a pleasure, Andrew. But next week we do have, actually on Sunday, we have a special stream. So those who want to watch with Vincent Pompetti. So he's an artist. So we're going to see him on Sunday at 4 p.m. our time, Eastern time.
He's the one that's doing the Firewolf, Saga of the Firewolf on the Kickstarter.
Anthology, right?
Yeah, super, super talented guy. So it will probably be en français. So you can tune in and have a nice bilingual fireside chat.
Awesome.
And then next week, we actually have Eric Campbell. He is part of Twitch. He's, he's a Twitch streamer.
He's a Twitch streamer. He used to do Geek and Sundry, and he does a whole bunch of other big channels on Twitch. I think he's doing something to do with like Star Trek or something now.
Yeah, should be super
very
fun.
Exciting.
And for those who don't know, we are going to PAX Unplugged. So if you guys want to join us, I don't think you remember your booth number by the top of your head. It was like 96 or whatever. We'll when we get closer to the program.
But we will be running games in the hotel lobby in the evenings.
Yes. The Marriott, right?
Courtyard Hilton, wasn't it the Hilton?
Hilton? Yeah, it might have been Hilton. Anyway, we'll mention it when we get closer to the date. Closer to the date.
Just we still got listen for the Viking screams and hollers.
Yeah.
You'll track us down.
Exactly. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great night or day, depending on when you're watching this, and skål.
And skål.
Oh.